of Green on the 13th day of January, in the year of our Lord 1869, with force and arms, in and upon the body of one Patrick Crotty, in the peace of God and the state of Wisconsin, then and there being feloniously, willfully, and of her malice aforethought, did make an assault. And that Angeline Troyer, with a certain pistol of the value of $5, charged with gunpowder, and one leaden bullet in her right hand, did discharge and shoot off to and upon the body of said Patrick Crotty, by force of the gunpowder did strike, penetrate, and wound him in and upon the left side of the breast, a little below the heart, 1 inch to the left of the breastbone, one mortal wound of the depth of 8 inches, and of the breadth of 1/4 of an inch, of which mortal wound he, the said Patrick Crotty, then and there instantly died. The indictment was signed by A.S. Douglas, the district attorney. He was first elected in 1868. He served 7 non-consecutive terms, and he died in office in 1908. Clerk of the circuit court, whose longhand we have today, was a fellow named W.W. Wright. And he then told the newspaper, and they would publish all the list of indictments and trials for the spring term. It ran columns. And it was interesting to read, to see what gets hauled into court in 1869. And there were foreclosures, but by and large, most of it was civil stuff, a dispute, somebody owes me money, somebody's cutting timber on my land, somebody stole my horse, stuff like that. But nevertheless, it was very interesting. Skip ahead a little bit. The trial of Angeline Troyer lasted 4 days. There were 19 witnesses called to the stand from among the 26 men and women who received subpoenas. Prosecuting the case was District Attorney Douglas, who was assisted by Messrs. Harmon S. Conger of Janesville and veteran attorney Elijah Temple Gardner of Monroe. That's the same E.T. Gardner who was the sheriff. His career also included stints as county clerk, state senator, and state assemblyman. The defense was ably conducted by Hiram Medberry, who had represented Angeline in the civil suit, Brooks Dunwoody, everybody remember that name? And this was Brooks Sr., I think, right? And Clarence G. Williams, all of Monroe. Mr. Dunwoody became a counselor at law in 1848. He was a county judge for 40 years, 1858 to 1898. His picture is out at the new Justice Center, hanging on the wall as one of the local judges. And he played an important role in bringing the railroad to Monroe. Judge Dunwoody participated in all local civil affairs, including terms as surveyor, district attorney, county board member, and his office was in Painted. The Sentinel reported after the trial on September 22nd that the defense was much stronger than anyone supposed could be made, and the trial developed some very astonishing facts that are certainly no credit to any enlightened community. The courthouse was crowded most of the time during the trial, but the room was as quiet as a Quaker meeting, and the trial throughout was conducted in a manner which reflects credit upon this age and generation, said the Sentinel. An oddity of the trial, at least by today's standards, is that not one medical doctor, not a single expert witness was called to testify to the mental state of the defendant, whose defense was that, owing to her unsound mind, a homicide was committed under circumstances which divested the act of any criminality. Coinciding with the trial, the circus came to town. The newspaper story continued that the courthouse was filled to suffocation when the announcement went forth on the tones of the bell that the jury were ready to give their verdict. They had been deliberating since 3 o'clock. When the not guilty was pronounced after 6 o'clock Thursday evening by the foreman, the accused was immediately released from custody and left the courthouse. With a smile of satisfaction, while a smile of satisfaction was visible on the faces of all present. Everyone in the attendance had predicted and told just how it would be, said the Senate. The verdict surprised no one, and the people are content. Purse and money was made up by our citizens last Friday and Saturday, and we are informed that Angeline will immediately go to her friends in Iowa. Reported in the newspaper. Although the verdict may have surprised no one outside of Crotty's home in Adams, the newspaper could not tell all. We have been asked why we would not report and publish the trial complete with all the testimony. We reply that such things are fit only for the Chicago papers. Publish everything obscene and devilish that happens to come under their notice, in a manner which certain gentlemen swore to their own lewdness after being informed by the judge that they were not obliged to testify, with a genuine leer and grimace of total depravity, was more befitting to the hells of New Orleans than to our free prairies and land of industry and sobriety. We shall not say anything of the arguments or testimony on either side, as those who were particularly interested in the trial had an opportunity to attend and hear the whole story. Unless there's people like me that 150 years later. The Janesville Gazette, the Milwaukee papers all picked it up. The Madison State Journal. State journals reported that prior to the shooting, Crotty was frequently going out to stimulate himself with liquor, while the girl also slipped out and procured a pistol. While these few newspaper articles gave the general outline of the murder of Patrick Crotty and the trial of Angeline Troyer, there was much left unsaid. When and where did these two young people meet? What was their relationship? How did it end so tragically? Who were their families? What was so obscene and devilish about some of the testimony? And why did the jury acquit her when she freely admitted the deed? And beyond that, what happened to Angeline afterwards and what became of the child? So I went to the histories, as most historians do, and Helen Bingham, first Greene County history, 1877, she did not miss this story. As it turned out, when the murder occurred, she was teaching at the high school just a couple blocks away, and these scholars that went past the murder scene and were part of it must have been some of her students. She called it, in her book, she characterized the Crotty murder as a dispute about money, which a woman demanded of the father of her child for its support. After many altercations in other places, the dispute chanced to be renewed at a hotel in Monroe, and the woman shot and killed a man. She was tried and acquitted. Simple retelling of what really happened. So basically, that's the first chapter of the book. I can tell you a little bit about what he's buried. Patrick Crotty was buried in the old Calvary Cemetery, which is west of town. It was the Catholic cemetery. After Greenwood came along, and the Catholic cemetery was across the road, the new Calvary Cemetery. But his grave is still out there in Old Calvary. Just, what is it, a mile west of town on Highway 11. Angeline did go to Iowa, but by the next year she was back in Monroe, and she was a maid at the hotel again. This hotel, the Monroe House, was built by a couple, a Swiss couple named Oswald, Casper and Anna Oswald. Actually, it was Casper's brother who was the carpenter who came from Switzerland and built the hotel. It was made out of wood. We remember a big stone building. And Larry and I he's put on the cover a photo. It's a big city look of the Monroe Hotel. You probably remember it. To get to the tavern, he went down the stairs. Okay. So she worked down there as a maid. She shows up in the 1870 census, living in that household with the Oswald as a maid. But her mother had died when she was about 8 years old. Her father died. She was the youngest of the family. Her father died when she, after the murder but before the trial, and her brothers were enlisted in the Civil War, and she was basically, she and her father lived several years up there in Jordan, and she did all the housekeeping, did all the cooking for her father. Had very little supervision. And the testimony in the trial talked about these all-night parties that these young people were going to, including Angeline and Patrick. They were called sprees, S-P-R-E-E. And the testimony was, yeah, we went to a spree at the Junction House. The Junction House, yes, was built and was holding parties in 1869. But these were house parties that they would go to. And there was alcohol in many cases. And the young people would slip away and go upstairs. And the host and the hostess would have to go upstairs and get these young people down. Much of the prosecution's case in this trial, they really disregarded any of her mental issues, or that she knew in fact exactly what she was doing, and basically tried to defame her character by bringing in all this testimony that, yeah, she was upstairs with this guy, and then she went upstairs with this guy. She denied it all. Anyway, those were sprees. It was a term I had never heard before that they used. So in the 1870s, after a while, she moved to Iowa. Her brothers and a lot of her family were in Iowa, and she got married out there. And the trial testimony says she married a guy named Thatcher. One of the real interesting facts is that during the trial, of course, the prosecuting attorney asked her, "Where'd you get this gun?" I got it from a guy named Thatcher, friend of the family's. And although the first names don't quite match up, I'm pretty sure she married the guy that gave her this $5 pistol. She never paid for it. He never asked for the money. But I'm pretty sure this is the same fellow. And they had 3 kids out in Iowa, and her son with Patrick Crotty lived with him out in Iowa, and in most of the censuses his name was Thatcher or Schroyer. It was never Crotty until much later he got married and moved out west into Montana, and then he starts using his name of Crotty. He married a girl from Missouri, and gosh, they had a dozen kids. Some lived up to the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And he sent for his mother. So Angeline got divorced from this Thatcher out in Iowa, and then went out to Montana and lived with her son, Patrick, who was a barber out there. And she died and was buried in a cemetery in a little town called Canyon Ferry. And you know the story of the West. You got to dam those rivers. Well, they dammed the river, and it backed up a little bit, and the town had to move. And then later they built a bigger dam, and it really flooded it out. And on an island in the middle of Canyon Ferry Lake is this little cemetery, and that's where Angeline is. So, any questions about any of this, or any comments, or like to know? My voice gets up. Yes, Dave?
When do you think to be ready to publish?
They're retired, come on. Ease up on them, right?
I'd say by the 4th of July.
Okay. Oh. Larry, deadline.
Larry had an idea. Circulate a notebook here if you want a copy, or you want us to email you or call you when it comes out. We'd be glad to do this. We self-published this book. Larry has various internet sources, and basically you send them a PDF or a Word document, and they say, how many books do you want? And Larry designs the covers, Larry puts pictures in there, Larry designs the back, and they'll send you a book. And then we sort of go through and we made a typo, or we want this picture over here. So then we order another one. This is definitely homemade stuff.
Tom, I got a question.
Yeah.
And you're reading these old newspaper clippings, is the writing as elegant as the ones you were quoting there on a regular basis? Or
By and large, it is.
Oh, it's
you know,
amazing.
These are weekly papers, so the deadlines weren't as, I don't know if you, nowadays I'm sure that you get a copy and Kim can tell us how working under a deadline, you don't always have the opportunity to edit your story. But just the style of writing is different. Now it's, noun, verb, and then, there was a fair amount of talent evidenced, I think, by the writers of these. And wait till you get to these 1940 police crime writers. This is great stuff.
It's so loaded, yeah.
It really is. Without, any bad words at all. But they sure can paint a picture. Shapeliness is Hardwick. Drawn, the lines are drawn. Anyway, thanks for all of you for coming out and still for.
Make sure you order enough books.
At least 100.
Oh, no, more than that.
Yeah. Tom was the one that has a better eye, a better understanding of how many books we need to
His
order.
first book, he had 10 or something.
How many did we order today?
The
Twenty
First
or
time,
30?
we ordered 10, but then for the book signing, we ordered 60. But
sold them out.
we ended up, we ordered 300, we sold about close to 300.
Good job.
We don't want to pass away with a basement full. We already have,
Our
so we
basement is
just
full.
go a little bit.
What were they thinking?
Yeah, 'cause we have no kids, so.
Here's photos of the 3 buildings that were on the square in 1869 that are still there. Those are old photos of the courthouse. If you want to leaf through the trial testimony and see, it takes a while to develop an eye for what he's saying. It's not easy to, but eventually, sort of like anything else, you can look at it long enough. Oh, that's how he makes his teas, or there's always something. And then on this map, this is J.T. Dodge's 1861 Greene County map. She lived in Jordan. Her dad's house, Adam Schroyer, is right here.